Hi, welcome to the next video on my Leyland 154 restoration. It starts off with me making a bush for the difflock lever, but I've sort of filmed all sorts of clips over the last couple of days and had to piece them all together, but hopefully it will make sense. And if you're watching this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers. Okay, little update. I've managed to pull the difflock lever out. I've manipulated it to get the difflock coupling. Sorry, get you in focus. To get the difflock coupling off the axle and extract. I can't get, this is the little lever that drops through this hole and runs in this to pull this in and out. I can't get that out of here without withdrawing the axle. And on closer inspection, this bearing here on this side of the diff is actually fine, more than usable. The other side axle isn't. I've got a new bearing coming for that, but that's quite straightforward to fit. I can't get new bushings for the difflock lever. One of the bushings, this is the one I've just beat out of that hole, and the little rubber seal that lives in there I've taken out. Here is the other bushing. That's what it looked like. That had actually dropped through and was just hanging on this shaft down here. So my plan is I'm going to machine out of this bit of brass a bush that will live down in there and sit in this recess. I can pull this shaft back up through it, get a circlip on the top, put it back together, and job should be a good one. That is the plan anyway. So I'm going to get this in the lathe, take some measurements and make myself basically what I would call a top hat sleeve. It'll run down in here with a hole through the middle for this shaft to run in. Incidentally, this shaft's showing no signs of wear at all. The top hat section will stop this bush dropping in. The lever will hold it all together, and we should be golden. Where is the little top plate? This top plate sits on there, so that will sandwich my top hat bush in there. I can just add an O-ring on the top to keep the worst of the moisture out, but that is my fix for the difflock lever. And someone in the comments wrote, why don't I read the manual instead of blundering around? This isn't really covered in the manual. It just shows exploded diagrams, very blurry, a brief description, and I have none of the special tools required for setting up the load on the bearings and whatnot, so why mess? So that is why I'm blundering around, is because I'm making it up as I go along. If you're not happy with that, well, go and watch someone else's channel. But I shall get this in the lathe and we'll make ourselves a top hat bush. So that's what we're going to do now. Okay, this is what we got so far. Ignore this end, that's from something else. Ironically, that side was nearly right, but he's just a bit wobbly. But that is going to sleeve down in there, drop into that recess, and all I've got to do is bore a hole through the middle of it to fit that shaft, which I think is 7/8 of an inch. But I think this is going to work just fine. So yeah, I'm going to get and drill a hole through the middle of it. Okay, I've bored the hole out. I don't know how well that's focusing. That is 5/8 of an inch. I've left it quite a rough finish in there to hold some grease. But that drops down lovely from here. Obviously we'll cut it off flush with the top. And then our little plate will retain that bushing in there. I'll probably put it in with some Loctite retaining compound as well. But if I show you, this is a beautiful fit over our shaft, and I think this is going to work. Now you're probably wondering, why didn't I make like the original bushes? I've got nothing to measure. These were split bushings. I can't get hold of them. The only place it's, sorry, pardon me, the only place that's got them in is in America, and I'm really not fussed about waiting all that length of time. And because I'm keeping the bearing in this housing, I've got no need to take any of this apart. It doesn't leak oil. The seals are all good. So I'm leaving it well alone. I'm going to drop my little top hat bush in. If you're wondering how I'm going to get this back up in that hole in there and through the bush, well, so am I. But what I'm thinking is if I weld a bit of welding wire to the end of that nut, I can use it to manipulate it and hopefully pull it back up through that hole. But I don't think it's going to fight me too much. And once that's in the hole, I can drop my bush down on top of it. And Bob's your uncle. Hopefully our difflock's fixed. But I'll bring you back in a minute when I've trimmed this bushing up. And we'll see if we can get it in there and how it fits. So give me 2 minutes and we'll get back to it. Okay. Here is my finished bush. I've put a little bevel on the inside. I'm hoping I can squeeze a little O-ring there. But that'll drop down in there like so. It's a pretty good fit. It looks quite loose, but it's really not. That plate will clamp down on top of that bush, and that'll hold it in place. Now all I've got to do is get that shaft back up in this hole and re-engage my difflock coupling. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to film that. I don't want to come over on camera as blundering around, not knowing what I'm doing, but I shall do that off camera. Once I've got that shaft in, we'll have a look and we'll see what the shaft fits like with the bush and whether I've made a good repair or wasted 45 minutes of my life. So give me 2 minutes and we'll see what we can get up to. Okay, I've got the bush installed. I've got the actuator, if that's what you want to call it. You can see it's moving our difflock coupling in and out beautifully. Very little play. I'm going to squeeze this rope rubber O-ring down on top of there. I think probably it could have done with a smaller O-ring. I might even omit the O-ring, you know. This lives under the petrol tank, so I can't see much water actually getting through there. I mean, there wasn't much water in this part of the gearbox, but if we put our little coupling down, I'm going to put the two little nuts in. I'm going to work out whether it wants there is a groove on this shaft. I think I might just drop a circlip in that groove to stop it dropping too far in, and then I'm going to put the lever on and see how it looks. But I am chuffed to bits with that repair, especially seeing as that bush is unavailable. But I've just fired up the lathe. That is my lathe in the corner, if you're wondering. I've got a mill stood there as well. But I haven't filmed me doing that on the lathe because my work light isn't working on the lathe and it's very dark. But we'll have I'll get the light sorted. I'll film something on the lathe at a later date, I'm sure. But I'm just going to put this back together, show you the lever in operation, and well, I think then I'm going to go and have a cup of coffee and call that a success. But I'll see you in a moment. Okay, I've put it all back together. This cotter pin's not very good. I think, I don't know, I think it could probably do with a new one if I can get one, but failing that, I think I'll just put a blob of weld on the end of the nut. The threads aren't great on it, but it wedges in there so nice. But now we've got, I can't zoom out any further. It's got beautiful action. The spring actually returns it all on its own. And there is no play in that whatsoever. I'm wiggling that bar around. That is a fantastic repair. I am very, very happy man with that. And I haven't had to take the axle apart. I've got the pin back in. I tied a bit of string to the end of it. And whilst there's not a bush in there, you can get the pin to lean enough. You can hook it back up. A little bit of fiddling will get the shoe back in that difflock coupling. And we are fixed. So none of that is in the manual. So that's me blundering around. But I think that is an excellent repair. And if I've ever got to change that bush, I can do it all from the outside. I haven't even got to take the axle off. But there we go. That is that bit done. Now to put it all back together. Okay, I fixed the diff lock lever, as you would have just seen. I'm now going to put this back in the rear end. I've got a new bearing for the other side of the diff carrier, which I'll put in a minute. Now the gaskets that you put on, they come in different thicknesses because it's the gaskets that set the preload on the diff bearings. Now I'm not going to go too deep into this because I haven't got the special tools required. Well, I can probably knock something up if I really tried, but I'm not going to bother. But measure the gasket that come off, which is 0.2 mil, more or less. So I've ordered a couple of different thicknesses. The blue one is 0.43 mil, and the brown one is 0.23 mil. So I'm going to be using the brown one this side, and I'll probably use the brown one on the other side. I have measured the, I'll show you shortly, but I've measured the bearing stack for the new bearing, and it does match the bearing that's come out. So I'll cover that shortly, but I'm not going to film this because it's just putting the axle back on and bolting it back in. The diff goes in this side with this axle. There's no other damage in this axle. I've checked that all over. So I'm just going to bolt this axle in, and then I'll get that one off and show you how I measured the bearing. And basically, I'm presuming it was right before I took it apart. Bearing in mind it's getting on in years, the tractor, but there's only so much you can do. Actually, I ought to clean that face up a bit before I put that on. There's only so much you can do here. And remember, this isn't like a frontline tractor that's about to go into the field and do work. It's a toy. I do use it for stuff. I do plan on using it for a bit of mowing next year, but it's not going to live a hard life. And in all honesty, this will probably outlive me. But yeah, I'm going to get on and get this axle on. I'm going to use the brown gasket that matches the thickness of the one that come off. Yeah, I'll get this side on, get that side off, and I'll show you how I measured the bearing thickness. Okay, I haven't filmed a lot of stuff the last couple of days because I've been up to other things, but I've got the right hand axle back on. I've taken this axle off and replaced the bearing. This side had a thicker gasket, so I have used the thicker of the two gaskets, which was the blue one. So we got a brown one that we put in this side and a blue one that we put in that side. They match the gaskets that have come out. Like I said, the thickness of the gasket dictates the preload on the diff bearings. I've only changed the diff bearing this side because that side, it was fine. The pitting on the race was right on the edge in one small space, and the bearing was fine. This is the bearing I've taken out. Obviously, I've just had to reconstruct that and put it back together. How do I know that this bearing was the same as the new one? Well, because I measured it. What you want to do, obviously this bearing's falling apart. You want to squeeze the bearing together, the new bearing, and measure it with your caliper. Across that way. And get your measurement. Now, if this bearing is fatter, thicker than the bearing that come out, you'll need to compensate with gaskets. If it's thinner, obviously same again, you'll take some gaskets out. In this occasion, that bearing measured the same as the new one. Now these are precision made bearings, so 9 times out of 10 you're going to find no difference. And you've got to be careful as well. Although this bearing's worn, it's not that heavily worn that it's going to affect the measurement. I've only changed it because I'm restoring this and want it to you know, work like new. So it had a new bearing on that side only. The tractor spare parts actually only had one bearing. Had they have had two, I probably would have changed this side as well, just because, you know, why not? As for the outer bearings in the drive shafts, all good. Nothing wrong with them. Whilst I haven't filmed it, I've put the top on the gearbox, obviously with a new gasket underneath. I fitted these new nifty little rubber boots. I mentioned in the last video about fitting them to stop oil going in the gearbox. I meant water, so ignore that. Also off camera, I've cleaned the bell housing out. She looks lovely in there now, like brand new. I fitted a new clutch release bearing, new clutch return springs. I think that is about it. I have found something to look on if you're doing your own. Whilst here, I noticed some of these nuts were a little loose. So I went round and I actually found a lot of loose nuts and bolts. Probably just due to the age. So I've gone round and tightened them all up. Like I mentioned before, the difflock lever is now sorted. Excellent. If you've got a wobbly difflock lever, get a local machine shop to make your bushing up. That is far superior to the factory bushes and much easier to fit. Other than that, I think, oh, last thing, this afternoon, I picked up the engine block. Excuse the stains on the top. I left it on the bench outside for 2 minutes and it rained. But they'll have no effect whatsoever. It's had the top skimmed because this wasn't actually flat. It had a 5 thou deviation on the top. The bores, beautiful. The local engine shop really does do good work. They're 20 thou over, so I've got new 20 thou over pistons coming. Because that needed planing, I am going to have to double check the cylinder head. I've never had one of these need skimming across the top, other than maybe just to clean it when they've had sleeves fitted. So I will check the cylinder head before I fully assemble that. But we got the engine block now, so I can get on and put that together next week. But as far as the rear axle goes, she is all done. I have got to fit new gaskets to the final drive covers, and I've got to put the brakes in, fit new rubber boots to the brake cross shaft actuators. But other than that, the rear end is all done. I'm just thinking, what else have I done and not showed you? I don't really think there is anything. Oh, one thing a friend asked, why haven't I cleaned everything as I've rebuilt it? I'm not going to bother with any of that until it's all fixed. I won't put like it all back together. I won't put the dashboard assembly over there on, or the fuel tank or seat. But I will get all of this so everything is perfect, and then I'll work on cleaning it. I've got a massive Karcher steam cleaner that will take the paint off and everything. So that will be that. But other than that, for this week, I'm pretty pleased with what I've got done. I think we're getting there. Start the engine next week. Tomorrow I'm going to have a clean up of the workshop because I have been doing some other jobs. I've had a couple of wheel bearings to do on a couple of cars. I've got to sort some injectors out on a Discovery 2 tomorrow. But other than that, that's everything for today. There might be a video out in the middle of the week next week, depending on how I get on. But other than that, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. I'm watching you. It costs you nothing, so press the little button. So other than that, all my many subscribers, all 45 of you, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.